My name is Maya Cole. I'm 30 years old, and I've worked at Beacon Ridge Partners for 6 years. 6 years is long enough to see the real face of a firm. Chicago loves to call one of its financial crown jewels. From the outside, Beacon Ridge gleams with glass walls, glowing press articles, and business cards stamped with gold foil. But inside, it's a buried battlefield where no one rises by merit, only by bloodline, power, or the tangled web of favors their families bought long before any of us were born. People say finance is ruthless, but I swear the folks in these offices are colder than any market chart. I walked into the Monday morning meeting the way I always did. 12 years since my father disappeared, 6 years since I stepped into this building, and I still showed up a few minutes early. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it let me slip into the quiet background without drawing attention. I was never the type who stood out at work, and I made sure of it. A simple black dress, hair tied back, a face that stayed calm no matter what. If anyone remembered me at all, it was because of one thing: the old silver necklace I never took off. The pendant carried a strange symbol, slightly raised on faded metal, its lines blurred, something between ancient and engineered. It didn't fit with Beacon Ridge at all, not with the skinny gold chains and diamond charms my coworkers flashed around like trophies. To them, my necklace looked like something pulled from a lost and found box at a train station. I knew it. I'd heard the whispers, but that morning, things went far beyond whispers. As soon as I sat down, Ethan Reed, our chief executive officer, was already droning through the agenda in his low, steady voice. I kept my eyes on my laptop, pretending to match the room's silence. Then the door swung open, cracking through it like a slap. Harper Reed walked in. There aren't many people who can announce themselves with nothing but their footsteps, but Harper was one of them. Her heels clicked across the floor in perfect, arrogant rhythm, confident and just a little showy. She was 26, 4 years younger than me, and carried everything I never had: inherited wealth, untouchable privilege, and a leadership title no one believed she earned. She wore a cream blazer, a soft pleated collar, and makeup so polished her lashes looked straight out of an advertisement. Harper didn't enter rooms. She performed. "Sorry, everyone. Traffic," she said. No one believed her. No one ever did. But no one said otherwise. She slid into the seat next to me, not by accident. Harper always chose that seat whenever she needed entertainment to kick off her Monday. And, like clockwork, she needed a target. It began when she tilted her head, letting her eyes drop to my necklace. I knew that look. The look of someone judging a cheap trinket. But this time she didn't stop at looking. She propped her elbow on the table, stretching her voice in a fake sweetness. "Cute necklace today, Maya. Very vintage. Looks like something from a flea market." A few people shifted awkwardly. No one said anything. Then Harper tapped the button to change the slide. A picture appeared on the large screen. I, photographed in secret, standing at a coffee shop last week, head slightly bent as I paid the barista, the necklace clearly visible against a black sweater. She had blown the image up so large that even the tiny scratch on the pendant glimmered under the projector light. The room cracked open with strained laughter. Someone covered their mouth. Someone pretended to cough. Others stayed painfully still. They knew it had gone too far, but no one dared step in. Everyone feared Harper and the power tied to her last name. I looked at the picture, then at Harper. Her eyes sparkled with smug triumph. I didn't react. I just held her gaze long enough for her to realize something was different today. My silence wasn't surrender. It wasn't a resignation. From the end of the table, a soft voice said, "I thought that pendant was actually antique." The room shifted into that awkward half laugh, half freeze. I felt my lips twitch, only for a heartbeat. Ethan tried to drag the meeting back on track with a talk about the partnership strategy with the Mallory Group. I barely heard him. My heartbeat was steady, my breathing even, yet in my mind, a door was opening. I lowered my eyes and touched the pendant with the tip of my finger. This time it wasn't unconscious. It meant something. A response, a confirmation, a signal. My laptop buzzed. A new email. One line. "Mallory Group will arrive at the office at 3 this afternoon. Vincent Mallory." The man at Beacon Ridge was treated like a golden gateway to a massive investment. The man whom both Ethan and Harper were desperate to impress. The man my father spoke about years ago. I closed my laptop and gathered my papers. People began filing out, wearing expressions mixed with curiosity and discomfort. None of them knew that what happened didn't hurt me. It simply unlocked a door I had been standing in front of for 6 years. I stood, fixed my jacket, and walked out of the room still thick with Harper's expensive perfume. My hand brushed the pendant again, and I heard my own voice, soft enough for the air conditioner to swallow it. All right, it's time. I walked out of the conference room and returned to my spot in the analysis area. My desk sat right by the window where the morning light stretched across the wooden surface, forming long, pale bands, like invisible lines dividing me from the rest of the office. 6 years here had taught me how to become invisible without feeling wounded. But those same 6 years also taught me to notice the things everyone else was too busy or too comfortable to see. I opened my laptop, my hands moving through each step automatically, but my mind drifted back to another time. I left home at 22. My father walked me to the door, no hug, no tears, just a hand on my shoulder and a single sentence. Watch. Do not act until the timing is right. He always spoke that way, vague yet heavy, as if he understood the world was far more chaotic than anything I had known. I thought he simply wanted me to grow up, to stay level-headed. But 2 years later, when he vanished without a single note or call, I realized his words had never been advice. They were instructions. The last letter he sent arrived through the post office. No return address. No handwriting on the envelope except my name. 4 short lines. A goodbye. A warning. And one sentence I can still hear word for word. When you see light reflecting where no one expects it, you will know it is time. I carried that letter out of the small apartment he once lived in, along with one thing he had placed in my hand before he disappeared. An old silver necklace, so worn it was barely silver anymore. But the pendant was different. Raised markings, circular grooves spiraling inward. It looked like a technical blueprint carved into something ancient. He told me it was not just a keepsake. It was part of a larger mechanism, a key to something he had not managed to finish. I never learned more than that, but I knew my father. He never wasted words. Each one held enough weight to pull someone back from the edge. So when he told me to watch, I did exactly that. I applied to Beacon Ridge Partners for a reason that seemed simple to everyone else, but was anything but simple to me. This was where my father once joined a confidential deal with an unnamed investment group. The deal appeared only once, buried in an obscure news snippet more than 10 years ago. But I knew my father had placed something of value inside it. I spent months searching, following trails so faint most people would dismiss them. And eventually, I understood Beacon Ridge was not just a major financial firm. It was the unfinished piece he left behind for me to complete. On my first day here, they threw me into a mountain of spreadsheets no one wanted to touch, but I understood them quickly. Numbers were not meaningless symbols to me. They behaved like heartbeats, like patterns. In a few seconds, I could see the irregularity hiding behind the data. I once saved a major deal from collapsing by spotting a misclassified account code. Ethan took full credit in a company-wide meeting, presenting it as the brilliance of the strategic leadership team, even though that team had done nothing but format the text. I sat in the back row, listening to everyone applaud Ethan. I just smiled. I also fixed a broken line of code in the transaction system. If it had stayed broken, the entire client data vault could have leaked. I fixed it at 2 in the morning during a long, rainy night. The next day, the IT team sent out a generic thank you email, unaware of who had done the work. I did not say a word. Silence was not weakness. It was discipline. It was obedience to my father's last instructions. I watched. I documented. I collected every tiny detail others dismissed as dust. For 6 years, I missed nothing. Ethan's blatant favoritism, his off-the-record relationships with suspicious investors, Harper's habit of using her father's power to force people into compliance. Every piece lived inside an encrypted folder, a living audit trail I built day by day. Harper made things difficult for me more times than I could count. But I never underestimated her. Harper was a master of image. She knew timing. She knew how to smile at the exact second people let down their guard. She could twist a story so cleanly that those listening forgot where the truth started. Most people fell for her in under 5 minutes because she was skilled at performing warmth. But beneath that surface, she was dangerous. She didn't know how to stop. To her, power was jewelry, and it had to shine the brightest in any room. I knew enough to destroy her image, but I didn't. Not yet. That night, when I got home, I set my bag down on the chair, opened my laptop, and revisited the folder holding 6 years of records, lines of text, audio files, and analysis sheets, all stored carefully in their own sections. I opened an old video, the only video I still had of my father. He sat at his desk in a small room, the desk lamp casting a halo on his face. He wasn't smiling. He rarely did. But his eyes were bright in a way I can't describe, bright and sad. Watching him like that made my chest tighten. He said in the video that he feared he wouldn't have time to explain everything, but he trusted I would find whatever he left unfinished. The audio cracked near the end, cutting off his last sentence. But his eyes stayed steady, just as I remembered. I closed the video and shut my eyes. When I opened them again, my tablet lit up with a single notification. No title, just one line. The vault in Zurich is preparing to open. I stared at the message for a few seconds before setting the tablet down. 6 years of watching. 6 years of living like a shadow. And now, the day my father spoke of had finally stepped out of the dark. I returned to the office in the early afternoon, but the air felt nothing like it had in the morning. Instead of whispering about me and the necklace, the entire firm was focused on something far larger, Vincent Mallory. Even without meeting him, every employee at Beacon Ridge knew his name. A man who was not born wealthy, yet somehow forced the entire American financial world to shift in his direction. Vincent Mallory started in a poor neighborhood in Cleveland, working out of a tiny garage with an old laptop he bought from a pawn shop. No rich relatives, no political connections, no lucky ticket. He climbed with cold decisions and an ability to see straight through what everyone else overlooked. People said he once shut down a deal worth hundreds of millions with a single question no one could answer. His logic was almost merciless. And the thing he despised most was pretense. That was why Beacon Ridge prepared what might have been the most extravagant presentation in its history. The slide deck had been remade at least 10 times. The conference room is polished. The chairs were rearranged. The water was replaced with a more expensive brand. Ethan wanted perfection so badly it was almost painful. 2 coworkers whispered that he hoped this meeting would revive his career after years of clinging to old achievements. I sat at my desk and kept working, but it was impossible not to hear fragments of conversations floating around. Someone called Vincent the king without a throne. Another said he could tell in 5 minutes whether a company was truly strong or only dressed up to look that way. Someone else claimed he would even judge how employees walked down the hallway. It was the kind of anticipation Americans excel at, half admiration, half fear. Around 3-10, an unusual ripple ran through the hall. I stood up to print a few documents and passed by the lobby. The elevator doors slid open and Vincent Mallory stepped out with 2 assistants. He didn't wear anything flashy, just a charcoal suit and a steel watch, no different from something an old-school engineer might wear. But that simplicity made him magnetic. He walked slowly, deliberately, with the composure of someone used to controlling the atmosphere in a room without speaking. Every pair of eyes followed him as if a figure from a Forbes profile had just materialized. Ethan rushed over to shake his hand, smiling the way people smile after practicing in the mirror a dozen times. Vincent only nodded, offering no favor. His gaze moved across the lobby as though he were collecting data through those steel-sharp eyes. I did not intend to cross his line of sight. I was only trying to find a printer that still worked. But as I stepped through the space between him and the analysis area, something shifted, a completely normal moment. But the second I passed, Vincent stopped walking. His eyes locked on one point, not on me. On the necklace resting against my collarbone. In that brief second, I felt the change. His expression shifted from razor cold to stunned, from detached to recognizing something buried deep. I turned and our eyes met. He took one step forward, ignoring Ethan still talking behind him. His voice was low and steady. "Where did you get that?" I did not look away. My father gave it to me. One sentence. Enough to freeze him mid-breath. His fingers trembled slightly. Not much, but enough for me to see. A man like Vincent Mallory did not tremble unless a memory had hit him straight in the center. And I knew why. Oliver Hale, a name the public had forgotten but American finance never truly erased, was my father. 2 decades ago, Oliver saved Mallory Group from collapse before the world even knew who Vincent Mallory was. No one knew how he did it. No reports, no contract, no public gratitude. Only two men ever knew: Oliver Hale and Vincent Mallory. Vincent stared at me for a long moment, as if piecing together shards of an old story. Then he stepped back half a pace, his expression closing again, but his eyes were different from the moment he stepped out of the elevator. Something like respect appeared, and it wasn't for Ethan. He turned back to Ethan, but whatever interest Ethan believed he had earned was gone. Vincent spoke a few polite sentences, then shifted his attention toward the presentation room as if he were waiting for Beacon Ridge to reveal its own cracks. I continued toward the printer. I didn't turn around, but I heard Vincent's voice behind me as he spoke to his assistant while heading down the right corridor. "Cancel the plan. We need to investigate Beacon Ridge." His voice wasn't loud, but sharp as a blade, and I knew instantly. The moment he saw the necklace was the exact moment the board shifted. No more lavish presentation. No more chance for Ethan to prove anything. From now on, to Vincent Mallory, Beacon Ridge was nothing more than a place waiting to be unmasked. And I understood. The destiny my father spoke of had just begun. I walked into the conference room at 2:58 in the afternoon. The air inside was thick with attention everyone tried to hide behind polite smiles. White lights poured across the oval table, reflecting off expensive suits, and the faces of people pretending they had everything under control. Ethan Reed stood at the head of the table, adjusting the microphone with the practiced movements of a man used to presentations polished within an inch of perfection. Harper sat in the front row, legs crossed, red lipstick perfect, a smirk on her face as if she already believed the victory belonged to her side. I chose my usual seat, the place I had sat for 6 years, close enough to see everything, far enough to remain unseen. But today, that no longer applies. The moment I sat down, I felt someone's eyes land on me. I looked up and saw that Vincent Mallory had arrived at some point. He sat across the room, but he wasn't looking at papers or slides or Ethan. His eyes were locked on me, sharp, focused, singular. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I knew this was no coincidence. Ethan launched into his presentation with a booming voice, talking about potential partnerships, mutual benefits, and long-term strategies he loved to brag about. Harper kept glancing around the room as if counting how many people were watching her. Once, she leaned toward another director and whispered something that made them laugh quietly, as if the company had already secured its place in the Mallory empire. But Vincent paid no attention. He watched only me. Not once did his gaze drift. I could tell it rattled Ethan. He sped up his talking, as though more words might earn him Mallory's attention. But right as Ethan clicked into the 8th slide, Vincent rose from his seat. He stood straight, not rushing, but with a presence that froze the entire room in an instant. Then he said a single short sentence that drained the color from Ethan's face. "Enough." Ethan blinked, mouth parting, as though no one had ever dared interrupt him mid-presentation. Harper shot upright, her expression going blank for a full second. No one moved. Even the hum of the air conditioning sounded louder than their breathing. Vincent walked past the table and came directly toward me. His footsteps hit the floor in slow, heavy beats, like each step had been decided years ago. I sat still, unmoving. When he stopped in front of me, the whole room held its breath. His voice came low and sharp, almost a command. "What is your father's name?" I stood. Not quickly, not hesitantly, just enough to let the answer land with weight. I met his eyes. "Oliver Hale." Right then, an email arrived from Vincent Mallory. One single sentence, but enough to sweep the fear out of my chest. "No one touches her until I complete verification." I read it 3 times. Vincent didn't send it to the board. He didn't send it to Ethan. He sent it directly to me. He knew exactly how they would react, and he knew I needed temporary cover to finish this the right way. Meanwhile, Ethan began scrubbing his tracks. I watched the edits appear live on the system. adjusted contract dates, altered electronic signatures, added notes to shift his misconduct into a so-called system glitch. He even tried deleting every entry tied to the deal from the year 2005. But Zurich had stored everything under a private encryption chain. He couldn't erase anything beyond the internal network, and he realized that far too late. Harper moved differently. I saw her messaging at least 3 junior employees, urging them to confirm that I had approached them for confidential information. 1 refused. 2 hesitated. Watching it happen on the system made something pinch inside my chest. Harper wasn't just cruel, she was desperate. She didn't understand that the harder she tried to push me down, the more she exposed her own fragility. Desperation makes people reckless. By early afternoon, a marketing employee knocked on Harper's door. He pretended to cooperate, acted like he would support her version of events. But he recorded the entire conversation on his phone and sent the video straight to the board and the audit department. In that moment, the story stopped being about rumors or accusations. It became evidence. Evidence that they manipulated employees and fabricated wrongdoing to cover their own mistakes. They had committed the most fatal error in any power struggle. They revealed their own weakness. I was reviewing the incoming data when a notification arrived from the audit department, sent simultaneously to me and 2 board members. Misconduct by Ethan Reed, 17 final. Misconduct by Harper Reed, 9 verified. I stared at the message for a long moment, not out of shock, but because of how clear everything had become. 6 years in the shadows, 6 years of watching, 6 years of patience. Now, the light was finally shining exactly where it needed to land, and the power struggle inside Beacon Ridge had only just begun. I left the conference room the moment Vincent Mallory disappeared behind the glass door. Footsteps rushed past me, directors whispered into their phones, conversations scattered up and down the hallway, yet everything felt separated from me by an invisible layer of glass. I walked straight to my small office, the one I had slipped in and out of like a shadow for 6 years. As the door clicked shut, the space tightened around me, quiet and still, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat. Not the rhythm of fear, the rhythm of someone finally confronting the truth they had waited for all their life. I set my bag on the desk, pulled out the tablet, and opened the access code. The screen shifted to the deep blue interface of Zurich's security system. In the few seconds before the file loaded, my father's face appeared in my mind with startling clarity. I knew whatever was about to open was not just data, it was the truth I had sensed for years, but could never reach. The first file appeared with a simple name, Oliver Hale. As I read, my chest tightened. Behind that name was a history the world once called legendary, yet never fully belonged to my father the way it should have. My father had been the kind of investor the financial world both admired and feared. They gave him many titles: the forecaster, the man who read the market, and the one the press loved most, the ghost of Wall Street. Not because he was trying to be mysterious, but because he arrived at the exact moment he was needed, fixed what others could not, and disappeared without waiting for applause. He saved 5 major corporations in the early 2000s, right in the middle of the financial collapse. Anything he touched stabilized as if lifted by a system only he understood. And among the companies he saved was one I would never forget: Beacon Ridge Partners. In the year 2005, this firm hovered on the edge of collapse, buried under internal misconduct and hidden debt. My father quietly injected capital, but not through any official channel. He signed an agreement that never appeared in any public record, a clause no one had ever spoken aloud: silent founding partner. A title symbolic of ultimate authority, yet my father never used it to rule anyone. He used it to force the company to reform itself. No spotlight, no trophies, no desire for glory. I understood instantly. That was why Ethan Reed panicked when he heard my father's name. At the time, Ethan had been a low-level manager, but he was the only one who knew the truth about Oliver's role. And instead of honoring that legacy, he buried it to climb his way upward. He turned the silent founding partner agreement into a forbidden secret, then built his position as chief executive on a lie that lasted many years. I steadied my breath and kept scrolling. The Zurich files were not just reports. They held letters my father wrote to me before he vanished. Some were long, some have only a handful of lines, but everyone carried his familiar voice, calm, precise, touched with that dry humor only he could manage. I read line after line, gripping the tablet until my knuckles turned pale. In one letter, he wrote, "You will not come to destroy. You will come to evaluate. A company survives only when it remains honest with itself. If Beacon Ridge is still worthy, let it stand. If it has rotted, let the truth finish the work." Tears fell before I realized it. Not from pain, but from the understanding that even when surrounded by power and corruption, my father stayed exactly who he was, a man who never sought ruin, only justice. I opened the next section of the Zurich analysis. It confirmed everything I had documented across 6 years. Ethan had not only erased my father's role, but also my father's. He had wiped every trace of the agreement from 2005 and manipulated the numbers to seize all credit for himself. Harper had been raised inside a structure built from lies. She wore her privileges like tailored clothes, unaware they existed only because of the corruption her family benefited from. Another report showed how Beacon Ridge had decayed in 8 years. Integrity replaced by empty ambition. Projects distorted. Lower-level employees were pushed into taking the blame so leadership could walk away untouched. The things I had watched and recorded all those years now stood in black and white before me. I leaned back in my chair and took one deep breath to settle the mix inside me. Sorrow, anger, relief, and finally, a quiet clarity. In that moment, I understood my 6-year journey had not been meaningless. I no longer needed to wonder what my father wanted me to do. Everything was clear. I turned off the tablet and closed my laptop gently. The late afternoon light spilled through the window, catching the pendant beneath my collar. I placed my hand over it and whispered so softly that the air barely carried it. "Let's begin, Father." I walked back into the office the next morning with a calmness that felt almost unnatural. But it didn't last long. The atmosphere inside Beacon Ridge had changed. Every gaze turned toward me, not with idle curiosity anymore, but with something sharper, guarded, almost hostile. I had barely set my bag down when an internal alert flashed across my screen. "Employee Maya Cole. Report to the legal department immediately." I knew this moment would come. I just didn't expect them to move this quickly. In the legal office, Ethan Reed was already there, his face flushed with anger, tangled with fear. Standing beside him was the firm's private attorney, a gray-haired man with thin glasses and eyes cold as steel. Ethan pointed at me. "You accessed materials outside your authority. You used falsified credentials and intentionally provided misleading information. This qualifies as serious corporate fraud." I met his stare. "Which materials?" Ethan stalled, clearly unprepared for my steady tone. The attorney answered for him. "The documents from the Zurich system, which you claim to have access to. No one in this firm can verify that. That was the angle they chose. If they could not deny the fact that Vincent Mallory recognized me, they would paint me as an imposter. Someone is exploiting her father's identity to threaten the company." And of course, Harper didn't waste a single second. By mid-morning, the rumor had already swept across the building that I was an undercover plant from Mallory Group sent to dismantle Beacon Ridge from the inside. A convenient lie, one that made sense to people already terrified. Before 10, the legal department informed me I was suspended pending investigation. They demanded my employee badge immediately. I watched the badge slip from my hand, feeling the strange numbness of having a part of myself removed. 6 years walking through these doors, 6 years living like a shadow to observe, and now shoved out as if I had never existed. But pain is not weakness. I left the main office floor, walked down to the lobby, and stepped outside as someone pushed out of their orbit. But I knew I couldn't stop here. A suspension was only the first step in their plan to erase me permanently. Standing on the building steps, I opened my tablet and accessed the security interface I had once repaired for the IT team, something they never knew I had done. Beacon Ridge had one flaw in its internal system. If you ever touched the source code, you could create a hidden entry point, and I was the one who fixed it 2 years ago. I used that script, opened a remote access line, and logged into the internal monitoring system Ethan believed only senior IT had permission to reach. Everything was there: document edits, contract alterations, manager notes, all under my fingertips. Right then, an email arrived from Vincent Mallory. One single sentence, but enough to sweep the fear out of my chest. No one touches her until I complete verification. I read it 3 times. Vincent didn't send it to the board. He didn't send it to Ethan. He sent it directly to me. He knew exactly how they would react, and he knew I needed temporary cover to finish this the right way. Meanwhile, Ethan began scrubbing his tracks. I watched the edits appear live on the system, adjusted contract dates, altered electronic signatures, added notes to shift his misconduct into a so-called system glitch. He even tried deleting every entry tied to the deal from the year 2005. But Zurich had stored everything under a private encryption chain. He couldn't erase anything beyond the internal network, and he realized that far too late. Harper moved differently. I saw her messaging at least 3 junior employees, urging them to confirm that I had approached them for confidential information. 1 refused. 2 hesitated. Watching it happen on the system made something pinch inside my chest. Harper wasn't just cruel, she was desperate. She didn't understand that the harder she tried to push me down, the more she exposed her own fragility. Desperation makes people reckless. By early afternoon, a marketing employee knocked on Harper's door. He pretended to cooperate, acted like he would support her version of events, but he recorded the entire conversation on his phone and sent the video straight to the board and the audit department. In that moment, the story stopped being about rumors or accusations. It became evidence. Evidence that they manipulated employees and fabricated wrongdoing to cover their own mistakes. They had committed the most fatal error in any power struggle. They revealed their own weakness. I was reviewing the incoming data when a notification arrived from the audit department, sent simultaneously to me and 2 board members. Misconduct by Ethan Reed, 17 final. Misconduct by Harper Reed, 9 verified. I stared at the message for a long moment, not out of shock, but because of how clear everything had become. 6 years in the shadows, 6 years of watching, 6 years of patience. Now the light was finally shining exactly where it needed to land, and the power struggle inside Beacon Ridge had only just begun. I arrived at Beacon Ridge that morning feeling like I no longer belonged there, yet knowing with absolute clarity that I needed to be present. The entire building felt like a dying organism, eerily quiet, with whispers seeping out of every corner. Employees looked at me with something beyond curiosity now, a mix of fear, dread, and the uncomfortable awareness that I had stepped out of a secret they never wanted to face. The summons from the board appeared the moment I set my bag down. Emergency session. Immediate attendance required. I stood, straightened my jacket, and stepped into the elevator, my heartbeat slow and steady, as if counting down to the hour that could not be avoided. When the executive doors opened, I saw Ethan Reed standing at the head of the table, his face pulled tight like a stretched wire. Harper sat near the left side, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, yet still trying to hold her usual posture of superiority. The board members sat in a half circle, every one of them tense. The large screen on the wall lit up, showing the face of Vincent Mallory. His presence alone, even through video, seemed to drop the room's temperature. When I stepped inside, no one spoke, but I could feel it in the air. This internal tribunal was created because of me and because of the truth that could no longer stay buried. Vincent spoke first, his voice cold as metal. Begin. Ethan seized the moment, pointing at me. Members of the board, she is impersonating the daughter of Oliver Hale. She fabricated documents, hacked the Zurich system, and attempted to sabotage this firm so Mallory Group could take over. Harper jumped to her feet, her eyes red and wet. Dad told me to do it. I only followed his orders. Ethan snapped at her. Sit down. You do not understand anything. I rose slowly and opened my laptop. I did not speak for several seconds. The air thickened, heavy with expectation. Then I connected to the main screen. A sequence of documents appeared, each file sealed with Zurich's blockchain encryption, something that could not be altered, forged, or destroyed. At the end of every page was my father's digital signature and the International Archive seal. My voice stayed steady, almost calm. This is the original silent founding partner agreement signed by my father and the founding board in the year 2005. The confidentiality clause was activated when he disappeared, and only the legal heir has the authority to unlock these documents. The board leaned forward. Harper's jaw dropped. Ethan stepped back half a pace. Another file came up. DNA records from a private forensic laboratory in Boston. 99.92% match with Oliver Hale's archived hair sample from the year 2004. The report is timestamped on blockchain. It cannot be altered. It cannot be forged. The room fell silent. I continued. Here is the sealed birth certificate, accessible only with the consent of the legal guardian, my father. You may verify it with the original Cook County archive. I have already sent authenticated copies to your email. Then the final blow appeared on the screen. A short video of my father was recorded when I was 16. His voice was low, steady, and his eyes carried a weight that swallowed the room whole. If you are watching this, it means you have reached where you were meant to be. You are my daughter. Maya Hale. Harper collapsed into her chair, hands over her mouth. Ethan went as pale as ash. I closed the video, shut my laptop, and looked around at the room, unraveling in silence. Ethan broke first. This is all fabricated. She made it up. Zurich was hacked. Blockchain can be... He did not finish. Vincent cut in, voice sharp as glass. Ethan, Zurich's blockchain has never been breached in 30 years. And if you think she could hack it, then you are giving her far more credit than you give yourself. A few board members nearly laughed. Harper grasped at her last thread of denial. But she is just a junior employee. How could she be Hale's daughter? I met her eyes. You created this fate with your own actions. No one forced you. No one pushed you. You walked straight into the pit your father built. Harper broke into sobs, shaking under the weight of every pair of eyes judging her. Ethan slammed the table and shouted, "She is destroying this company. I will not let her ruin everything I built." He lunged toward me, but two security officers grabbed him before he could take a second step. He no longer looked like a leader, only a man stripped bare by fear. The chair of the board stood, his voice firm and exhausted. "Ethan Reed, you are terminated from Beacon Ridge Partners effective immediately. Your case will be forwarded to a federal criminal investigation. You are banned from this property." Harper was sobbing too hard to respond. "Miss Harper Reed, your contract is terminated effective immediately. You are barred from accessing any internal system and prohibited from entering any Beacon Ridge facility." Her cry rang through the room, sharp as metal hitting the floor. Ethan screamed as he was dragged out, a man losing everything in real time. When the doors shut behind them, the silence that settled over the room was thick enough to touch. I looked at the empty chief executive chair. No one sat there now. No one would. The board stared at me as if waiting for something inevitable. But I only looked at that chair for a long moment, then turned away. I had not come to sit in it. I had come to finish what my father left behind. And the cleansing had only begun. I stood in the empty conference room after Ethan and Harper were escorted out, the air still carrying the scent of chaos and collapse. The chief executive chair across from me looked like a wound ripped open, and the board watched me with a mix of expectation and cautious fear. They did not know what I would do next, and I had no intention of letting them predict it. I did not need their intelligence. I needed their honesty. The chair of the board cleared his throat, breaking through the thick silence. "Maya, please sit." He gestured toward a seat near the center, a chair reserved for senior leadership, a chair I had spent 6 years watching from a distance. I remained standing. He continued. "We have discussed internally and believe the chief operating position is vacant. The board is unanimous in believing you are the most qualified to take it." Another member leaned forward, his voice carrying a touch of urgency. "Not only the chief operating officer. If you want, we can place you on the board immediately. The most competitive compensation in the industry. Voting rights. An office on the 36th floor. Even preferred equity." A different member added, "We want you to know that Beacon Ridge honors the legacy of Oliver Hale, and we hope you will continue to protect it from a leadership position." I looked at them. One by one, every face revealed the same fear, the fear that if I refused, I would become a force far more dangerous than any chief executive. They did not offer positions because they respected my talent. They offered them because they feared me. They feared the name Hale. They feared Zurich. They feared the truth I held. And because of that, I smiled. I opened my bag and took out a small black velvet box, the one I had carried with me since morning, but had not touched. No logo, no pattern. A box as plain as a final period. I placed it on the table. The board leaned forward, believing I was about to accept the power they were handing me. I opened the box. Light struck the smooth velvet. I removed the necklace from my collar, lifted the pendant one last time, and placed it inside the box with the care of laying down my own heartbeat. I closed the lid and spoke. I came to audit, not to rule. A young director dropped his pen. Someone else forgot how to breathe. The chair of the board leaned back, stunned. No one in the history of the firm had ever refused power like that. I continued, my voice steady but not soft. If you truly want Beacon Ridge to survive, I have conditions. All eyes shifted toward me, drawn in like metal to a magnet. First, a full ethical restructuring. No more nepotism, no more concealed misconduct. A transparent process for every department. Second, protection for lower-level employees. I want a legal support fund, a mental health fund, and an independent reporting line outside of human resources. Third, the full history of Oliver Hale must be made public. No omissions. His contributions must be placed in the official record. And finally, Beacon Ridge will establish a scholarship fund in his name for finance students without resources. The room listened as if witnessing something outside the normal laws of corporate reality. I did not pause. I met each of their eyes and delivered the final terms. That is the price for me leaving in peace. If not, Zurich will release every document to the public, and I will not stop them. The room froze. After several seconds, the chair swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. We agree. The board is unanimous. We will implement your conditions immediately. All terms will be documented today. I nodded. No smile, no triumph, only a strange lightness spreading through my chest. I picked up the velvet box, turned, and walked out. No one stopped me. No one said a word. My footsteps echoed through the hallway like the final drumbeats of a long war. As I passed the workstations, employees who once never dared look at me straight whispered among themselves. Someone murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. She is like John Wick, but the financial version. A few seats behind them burst into soft laughter, the kind that finally breaks after a day stretched too tight. I did not look back, but the corner of my mouth lifted slightly. When I stepped outside, Chicago had begun to rain, a gentle shower that hit the pavement like it was washing away years of buried lies. I stood beneath the awning for a moment, watching the water spread across the street, feeling both hollow and peaceful in a way I had not felt in years. The audit my father entrusted to me was finally complete, and now the rain was enough for me to begin a new chapter. I left Beacon Ridge in light rain, my shoes pressing into the wet pavement without leaving a trace of hesitation behind. Not long after, my phone vibrated. The name on the screen made my chest pause for a beat. Vincent Mallory. His message held 4 words: "Your father would be proud." I stopped under the awning of a small cafe on State Street, gripping the phone. Something in those short words cut straight into the deepest part of me. It was not praise, no approval. It was an acknowledgement. Witness. And it came from the last man to see Oliver Hale before he vanished. I took a long breath and kept walking. In the days that followed, the news cycle erupted with stories about Beacon Ridge. Article after article. A once-renowned financial powerhouse exposed. A chief executive under federal investigation. His daughter was accused of manipulation and abuse of power. Ethan and Harper were forced to face the press, the law, and the public's anger. Cameras followed their every step. Their once confident faces turned pale, unsteady. No power left to hide behind. No reputation is strong enough to shield them. As for Beacon Ridge, the firm began a true restructuring. Lower-level employees received new benefits. Mental health programs were restored. People who had been overlooked for years suddenly found themselves rising. The name Hale quietly rewired the structure of the entire company. But I no longer belonged there. I knew that clearly. I packed my things on a calm afternoon, My small apartment had always been simple, but the top shelf had held something I had avoided for too long. I set the velvet box containing the necklace on the table, then opened a large cardboard bin filled with documents, a job application, an employee badge, several Zurich files, now digitized. The next morning, I walked into the offices of a nonprofit in the South Loop, a small building, nothing grand, nothing polished. But it carried clear traces of the community finance programs my father had once spoken about. He dreamed of building a system to help low-income families escape debt traps, learn to manage their money, and break free from the pressure of large institutions. Now I would finish the part he could not. That evening, after the rain stopped, I sat in my new apartment and opened the old wooden box I had avoided for 6 years. Inside were the letters my father left in the Zurich vault, each envelope written in his familiar handwriting, firm with a slight tilt. I opened the last one. If you are reading this, it means you have completed your part. I was not someone who cried easily. For years, I trained myself to bury emotion as a survival instinct. But as I read the rest of his words, that shell cracked like a pane of glass, struck at its weakest point. You do not have to carry my legacy. You only have to live as yourself. If the day comes when you must face those who harm the world, remember this. You are not there to destroy. You are there to remind them that justice still exists somewhere. And if you live truthfully, the world will shift on its own. Tears dropped onto the page, blurring a few letters. I folded the letter and held it to my chest, as if it still carried his warmth. That night, I took the velvet box holding the necklace to Lake Michigan. The Chicago sky glowed orange and purple with the sunset. Waves tapped gently against the rocks, steady as a farewell. I opened the lid. The necklace lay inside, worn and darkened, heavy with the weight of a hidden world. I lifted it, letting the cold metal touch my skin for the last time. Thank you for trusting me, Father. Then I let it go. The necklace touched the water, sending out a small ripple. It sank quickly, as if the lake had been waiting for it. When the surface stilled, something inside me loosened, like the final key of the past returning to where it belonged. I stood there for a long time. The lake wind brushed against me, carrying the scent of rain and a freedom I had never known. Oliver Hale left a secret legacy for the world, but he left a mission for me. When the sun fully set, I turned away. No necklace, no chains, only a new road opening ahead. Maya Cole was never the heir. I was the final test my father left for the world.